coming, hearing about what your finance team does for you, and meeting the people that you can talk to at any time and hear about our processes and policies. So I'm Terry McCune, I'm treasurer, and I'd like to introduce the panel. We've got Bill Angus, assistant treasurer, also treasurer of the capital campaign. And I know we have questions on that. Bob Capitini, he is the finance chair. And we've got Lisa, and she's the one who you see in the office, and she just processes everything, does all kinds of things. And we've got Erin. Erin is our controller. She is self-employed as a CPA and works for a number of churches. And then Johnny Watson leads our investment committee. And thank you very much. And he does that with the help of John Giacaris, who is our investment advisor. So why don't we just stop a little bit and start, Bill, just tell a little bit about your background. How he has been treasurer many, many times, and I could not do what I'm doing without his support. He's been a wonderful mentor.
Thanks, Terry. I'm Bill Angus. I'm a retired CFO of a public corporation here in San Diego. I got involved in church work after I retired. I've been treasurer of St. Bart's a couple of times. I've been treasurer of the diocese once, served on the corporation at diocese. I've been chairman of the finance committee here at St. Bartholomew's. So I'm fairly familiar with church financing and accounting and how those sort of things work. And I think we've achieved a pretty good system of checks and balances, which hopefully you'll hear a lot about today.
Hi, I'm Bob Capitini. What's relevant for this discussion, I've been finance committee chair and also treasurer, and then back and forth a few times. Bill and I switched off several times on that. So we're glad you're here, and be pleased to answer any questions you have.
You're also a retired professor, are you not?
Well, yes, I'm a retired professor of accounting.
Thank you.
That's my background. Lisa?
My name is Lisa Saldamondo, and I started here March of 2017 when Nina retired, and I've been in the accounting field for over 25 years in various different roles, although this is the first church I've worked for, but I'm enjoying every bit of it.
And again, I'm Terry, and my background is years ago, I decided that I wanted to get into accounting in my mid-30s, and I became a CPA. I worked a little bit for public accounting, then I became a controller of a manufacturing company, and that company was here in Poway, and then I became their CFO and then their president for a while. I retired in June, and I wanted to give back, and I'm just thrilled to be working. You have heard the expertise, and you'll continue to hear that we have here. It's a great place to engage with professionals.
I'm Erin Seca-Pineda, and I started in the accounting world kind of in 2006. I always talk about I wanted to be a CPA since I was 12 years old, and it took me a minute to sort of get there, but I landed in my first CPA firm, specialized in nonprofit audits and tax, so I kind of fell into that role. In my public accounting career, I had the opportunity to move to another firm where I became partner in charge of the nonprofit and audit and tax division, and then when my kids were small, I branched out on my own and started my own firm. Moving to a specialization in the church field because I'm a member at St. Paul's Cathedral, and we went through a little bit of a situation in around 2012-13 with a systems conversion, and I jumped in there first as a volunteer and then started working for them professionally. So currently I work for 5 of the churches in town and do a little bit of work directly for the diocese. And about 95% of my work is Episcopal Church related, and I'm here on Thursdays generally, so that's where you can get me.
All right, well, thank you, Erin. I'm Johnny Watson. I'm probably the least qualified of all these people in here, educationally or whatever. Anyway, but I chair the investment committee or investment subcommittee. We are part of the finance committee, and Basically, we manage the endowment fund and the investments within the endowment fund. We have specific guidelines that we adopted in 2006 for investments, and we follow those rather strictly. We have made some adjustments in the past as necessary, as market conditions might require, but we've got several people on the investment committee that are really experts in the field. We also have a financial advisor, John Giocaris with Wells Fargo, and John works with the committee. We make the decisions. We direct John to make the trades and this sort of thing. And then we also will make recommendations to the Finance Committee if there are changes. The Finance Committee in turn makes recommendation to the vestry. The vestry is the ultimate source of our authority in anything we do. So that's the way it works. But it's enjoyable, and I can say that the endowment continues to grow, and I think we're basically getting along just fine at this point. Terry?
Thank you. And Aaron talked about being in on Thursdays. Bill and Bob often come in on Thursdays. So if you want to, it's a lively day on Thursday and fun. And you can see how 5 people can fit in a very small office and all talk at the same time. But it's a great day if you have some questions. So what I'd like to do is just also note the other volunteers in our church that help and sit on the Finance Committee. Their names are listed there. They also, if ever you have questions, are great resources. So what I thought we'd do today is, I thought it was important, if you hadn't been in nonprofit accounting, and to realize how the funds are segregated, how we can track when a donor has a specific request, gives a specific donation. And so what I did on the second page is how your donations support ministry. So what I'm going to ask the group to do is we'll kind of go through and do a brief description of each of these funds. What I ask you to do is to please feel free ask a question at any time. This is an informal presentation of information, and the best way, what we want to do is answer your questions. So I'm going to start off, and I'm just going to talk about the largest fund, the one you hear the most of, and that's the operating fund. Those are the funds that we use to operate our church, and within that there are 6 departments. So we have worship and pastoral care, and in that we always collect in all of these departments any wages and salaries and any expenses. We have the Department of Music that you're well aware of, and we have Christian formation. We have administration, and that would be the people that work within administering. Lisa's in that department, Bethany is in that department, and then all the expenses that you can imagine go with running a facility. And one of the ones that I think they've done, the church has done a really good job in making sure we're up to date on things like office technology. We've replaced a couple of computers. We have software that Aaron has been talking about to track our finances. That all takes, it takes money, but it also takes expertise to have and run that software. And this year we've been able to do, with Aaron, Lisa, and Bill's support, we've been able to create accounts receivable, which can track the capital campaign funds. We have a preschool that this year is the first year. We have 125 students. We are now professionally able to track and communicate with the parents what their tuition is, what they've paid, what they owe, versus, I don't know how they do it, handwritten type things. It's actually a software system. So you'll see, if you look back in history, that in administration, there is money invested in keeping St. Bart's at the top, and we also did an internet project, an infrastructure internet project this year. It was an investment. So then we have in maintenance and utilities, which Larry is here, and he's very familiar. Any questions you have on those finances, it's a guy to ask. And so in that's where we would capture the salaries of our sexton and our part-time sexton, and also all costs. We also have a maintenance reserve that is set up and funded for large expenses. And if you haven't been in the office, you can look at the most recent one, which was carpet installation. So all that is tracked. So Fund 1 is what we talk about the most. That's what we seem to pay the most attention to. But there are other very important funds too. And I'll speak to the preschool, and that one, we capture, it's been a very well-run, and it shows how well-run it is by its capacity of students. We have 125 students, and it generates over $3,000 a month that goes to the operating fund, which we just talked about to help support. And in that, you've got teacher wages, you've got the expenses of the preschool, and then you have all the different areas of income, which would be your monthly tuition, enrichment classes. And so it's a very vibrant area that needs its expenses well tracked so we can manage it. So in the next two funds, I'm gonna ask people, and I apologize, outreach and working funds. I wonder if, Erin, can you speak to outreach and working funds?
Sure. So, one of the things I wanna just tangent off for just a second to describe is that we do practice with our accounting software what's called fund accounting. And what that actually means is that our accounting system operates almost as if we have 8 separate little businesses that are connected under one umbrella. And so we can present entirely separate and distinct financial statements, balance sheet and profit and loss, or income statements for each of these funds separately. And but they're all under one umbrella, and so that we have the capacity to do transferring as needed between them. One example being what Terry mentioned, where the preschool provides an operating contribution each month. And so that shows as an outflow of the preschool fund and an inflow in the operating fund, that kind of thing. So the third fund that we're talking about is the outreach fund. And in the outreach fund, we also account for the thrift shop. And we have different sort of categories, we call them departments, of the outreach fund for different kinds of activities. So for example, the interfaith rotational shelter that happens once a year for the homeless has its own little pot, and any incomes that come in to support that are accounted for there, and any expenses of that ministry are able to be accounted for there as well. And so we are able to maintain a fund balance specific to that ministry. We primarily transact our outreach activities through a general outreach department, and the outreach committee develops a budget every year indicating what's going to be granted out to other organizations who are doing ministries that St. Bart's wants to support. And so we're able to account for that again, completely separate, and maintain accurate and timely reporting of what the available fund balance is for our outreach ministry. The working funds is the fourth fund area, and that's the area where we have all of the little funds that all of the ministries that have gathered contributions or income or other income sources over time. We keep track of all of those fund balances and those activities in the working funds. So they're all I refer to them as special funds or non-operating ministry funds. And what I always like to say in these kinds of formats is, if you've been active in a ministry, even in the past here, and you know something about something that may have a balance there, we'd love to hear from you, because some of the funds are very active, such as the health and wellness ministry is very active, but we have other balances that don't seem to change much from year to year. And so, but there were contributions made sometime in the past for the specific purpose of supporting that ministry, and so those balances remain, and they sit, and we continue to work with Father Mark and the team, and asking from time to time to see, what's going on with these ministries, and how can we make sure that the money that was contributed in the past is put to the correct and appropriate use. So again, one of the things that's great about our system is that we can provide ministry-specific fund balances on an ongoing basis, and we can ensure that all of the reporting for specific ministry activities is isolated and segregated from the operating activities.
And so I'm just gonna speak a couple of other ones. Prayers and Squares is a very active fund in Fund 4. That's another one many of you are familiar with. And if you are in one of those ministries and would like an update, or you're having a meeting, and you would, and Lisa would be happy to call her up, email her, to print, what's the most recent activity? Tell us from what period of time. She can go for since the beginning of the year and show you all the detail. Correct? Yep. Yeah, you'd need about a day, a couple days, you know, for something like that. What do you think?
Usually say pop in and try to do it when they're there, because they're
Okay.
there. So if you pop into the office, I don't typically have a set schedule, but I try to do Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, since I am part-time, but not to say you wouldn't catch me on a Wednesday or a Friday.
Yes, especially recently, right? Especially recently. So just, if you're in, again, with other people and they're talking about something they don't know, or they're asking questions, just please guide them to us. We'd be happy to help them. Okay, so, I'd like, big part of what we're doing right now, the capital campaign. Bill, can you speak to Fund 5?
Sure. In Fund 5, because of accounting rules, if I actually showed you or discussed the technical income statement, you'd get all confused, and so would I. So we translate it into something we can all understand. And as of September 30th, total raised through pledges and contributions is $5,271,871 for the Honor Faith Build Future campaign. Project to date, so that includes both last year and this year, we've received payments on those pledges and contributions of $1,629,754, which is very good. So far, in total expenses for this for the project, we've incurred $376,941. That includes both the cost for the campaign consultants who helped us kick the campaign off and raise the money and get the pledges, and also the architectural and engineering fees that are ongoing now as we are planning the future of the campus. As a result, at the end of September, we had $1,251,380 in the building fund available for use in developing the campus. So that's where we stand today on that one.
Anyone so far have any questions on any of these funds?
Yeah, remind me, what was the total projection of the costs for the building campaign? So what are we shooting for, like 8 million?
Oh, the goal of the campaign is 8 million, that's correct.
Okay.
Didn't the cost change and actually go down a little bit when they revamped it and decided?
Well, the actual costs for the project are not yet fully determined because the plans are still in flux. The thought was when, and Larry, you jump in on this because you sit on that architectural committee, by doing away with the freestanding chapel and putting the chapel at the end of the admin building, it was thought that that might save money in the long run, but I don't know where that stands.
It will.
Okay.
It will, and that's the chapel and the youth room. The youth room is switching over to the conference room, adding a kitchenette in there for future use. That should be starting early next year with a summer finishing. And that will go through, and we're all in agreement as to, we're still looking at the details and finishes and all the rest of it. But that's pretty much of a given right now, and that schedule is fairly well firm at this point, that we're going to go ahead with that part of the expansion, and we're all looking forward to it, and we're all united and just can't wait for it to happen. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bill. Johnny, I mean, you talked a little bit about the endowment fund, but maybe some historical perspective? People
Sure.
who haven't been here
Yeah.
that long?
The endowment fund and the guidelines, I said, were actually set up, we adopted, it was Vestry adopted it in 2006. It's been modified 3 times, I think, since then. as the needs demanded. They're not unlike investment guidelines that you see with any endowment fund, but this is unique to the diocese and to St. Bartholomew's too, and it meets our needs. Part of the guidelines require that we review the guidelines once a year and see if there are any changes or adjustments to it. We went over that last Thursday evening, reviewed it, and although we didn't make any changes, we did decide that because we had a long discussion on our bond portfolio, that we may need to adjust how we define our bond portfolio in the future. We'll review that again in January at our next meeting. We have quarterly meetings, and at those quarterly meetings, we invite our financial advisor, John Giucaris. He gives us an update on our entire portfolio with a report that looks like this from Wells Fargo. It lists all of our assets and our yields. It's a well-balanced portfolio that we feel has worked well for us. What else can I say? The endowment fund does contribute to the general fund, and we make a recommendation yearly as to what we feel that the endowment fund what our earnings would be that we can generate to provide to the general fund. This year, we're going to provide $28,000, roughly $7,000 per quarter. And so that goes into support ministry of the church as a whole. We've got an excellent committee that basically have had quite a bit of experience, and I kind of consider myself the note taker on this, but I do enjoy listening and the give and take of what goes on, and I think that we do an excellent job of, if you will, guarding the assets of the endowment and following the endowment guidelines. So, you have questions?
Yeah.
Anybody?
What's the history, of the endowment? I've never thought of an endowment at a church, but
It was set up about 35 years ago.
How did it get started?
And the purpose of an endowment fund is essentially people give gifts, and the intention is to keep the gifts themselves and have it grow through investment, but only use the earnings to help with our various ministries. Right. So as Johnny indicated, it's what'd you say it was about 28,000?
28,000 this year, yeah.
That the endowment fund takes of earnings only,
right.
And it goes into the general fund.
Yeah, but earnings are also defined as capital gains as well as as well as interest and dividends.
Wow.
And the good news is the endowment fund has grown over those 35 years. We now have over $800,000 of assets in the endowment fund.
And the other thing is that we've gotten a little bit more sophisticated. In fact, in the Episcopal Church, endowment funds, particularly back east, are usually the rule rather than the exception. In fact, and there's some theological arguments about this, some of these churches back east basically exist because of their endowments.
Yeah.
And that's sort of sad.
Yeah.
But they can be very, very helpful, particularly for a vibrant ministry that we have going here at St. Bart's to have that. And as a result, what we do now, there's actually a formula that we use where we take the average of the endowment for the past 3 years as of September 30th, and put it together, divide, and come up with that average of what the net asset balance is. And then we take, I think it's 4% of that, and we say that's the contribution for the operating budget for the coming fiscal year.
And do you mind speaking a little bit about last year? Was it last year, or was it this year, where the endowment really had a nice increase because of a specific gift from?
Well, that's happened numerous times, and basically, there's two ways you can get an endowment. Some endowments are on purpose, and the whole endowment comes in, and there's nothing more that you can do with it. Because it's been given with paperwork in such a way. It's totally donor restricted, and what Bob described is exactly the way it's to be handled. However, the vestry numerous times will be the benefactor of a will, and we simply get a rather large check from an estate that says for ministry at St. Bartholomew's. Well, we have a policy now that adopted by the vestry that says that the first 10% of that goes to outreach. The balance then goes into the endowment fund for investment to further support the church on an ongoing basis. And those are the kinds of donations that really help to grow that endowment in the more recent
That's
history.
right, because that was real benefit this year, so.
So there's only $78,000 in the endowment fund that's donor restricted, meaning it's required by the donor restrictions to never be spent, the principal to never be spent, the original gift. And the rest of the $800,000 balance is accumulated through these gifts in the past, bequests or other large gifts that have been received, and the accumulated earnings on those gifts.
Thank you very much. The next fund that we want to talk about is Columbarium Fund. I'm going to ask Bob Capettini.
Yeah, well, the Columbarium Fund, and you look out to your left and see the Columbarium there, which was started by Terry Cashma after the death of his wife. And so we currently have, Columbarium Fund has assets of over $125,000. Most of that, about $100,000, is set aside for perpetual maintenance and upkeep. And so if you've been up there recently, you've noticed that they've done some things. We're currently having some problems with some of the niches, and so the funds that we have in perpetual care are going to fix that. You also may have noticed in our new building campaign that we're going to have a different walkway up there, down at that end. So that's what that money is used for. And so if you haven't been up there to see it, go up there and take a look. It's a wonderful, quiet place. I have a sister-in-law's ashes that are up there, and I go up there every once in a while. And I know some people in this room have relatives that are up there. It's a wonderful, peaceful place to go. And again, that's a separate fund that is used just for the columbarium. They're also scheduling to add some more niches, and again, we have funds to do that. We've got about $30,000 to do that. Let me just backtrack one thing. When Terry was talking about the operating fund, one of the things she didn't mention was that our budget is over $1.2 million for our day-to-day operations of this church. So you can tell this is a good-sized business, essentially, that we operate.
Thank you, thank you. The last fund, and I'm going to ask anybody who wants to speak to Rector's funds. The understanding is the Rector's funds are at the discretion of the Rector. There are sometimes some special needs and things that don't go through, to support an individual or a family in need. That would come through there. And what are some other sabbatical?
Yeah, one of the things that we are required, because we're an Episcopal church, to have a pastoral needs fund, which must be funded. Generally speaking, our rectors have been very, very artful, I guess is the right word, in soliciting lots of donations in over and above the normal operation of the church to keep that pastoral needs fund up there. In addition to that, though, the open offering on the last Sunday of the month is always put into the Pastoral Needs Fund as a policy that the vestry adopted a couple of years ago.
Thank you.
And the type of things that that's used for, someone may be laid off from their job and they need money for rent or something. That's not an unusual occurrence. And the wonderful thing about this is the pastoral funds are all ministered by the clergy, and it's all confidentiality.
Very confident.
So it's really nice, and it's of course what you'd expect from a church, that essentially when people have some certain needs, the clergy are then able to have some funds to take care of them in the short run.
Thank you. We have a few minutes left, and I want to make sure we talk about some of the processes that we use. Are there any, though, questions, any additional questions about the funds, the 8 different businesses yet?
Could I make a short statement?
Yes, you may.
Okay, thank you. I'm on a variety of committees here, and so I have a fairly broad perspective of how we handle our finances here, how we, going from how we do stewardship to how we end up spending with vestry approval. I'm going to say something about these folks up here, something about the vestry, and something about the people who handle the donations and the gifts that all of you give to this church every year. Okay, when I was responsible for stewardship, one of the things that I would mention to people that I was talking to about giving, I would say every dollar that you give is precious. Every dollar you give is precious to this church and to us. All these people here, okay, know that. And as a member of this committee and other committees, okay, nothing is done haphazardly with your donations. Okay, nothing is done in the spirit of the moment. Nothing is done, no expenditures are made because oh, everybody else is doing that, so we should do it too. Every dollar that this committee gets, and every dollar that is recommended for the vestry to spend, every dollar is precious. And these are the folks, these are the guardians of that thought, to make sure that every time you give, you can be confident that it will be to the glory of God, and not somebody else's glory, not somebody else's ego, or anything like that. I want to make that clear, and if you'd like more information on how that works, I'd be happy to help you out, and so would everybody up here. But these people are never going to say that about themselves, okay? Because they're humble servants to the Lord, okay? Guarding what we give to make sure that it goes to the glory of God. And I wanted to make sure that we all understood that. And now, one of the things I belong to is a choir, and I better get over there so I know what I'm going to sing this morning. No one else can leave, just me. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. That was very, very kind. Very good. So one of the things we wanted to make sure that as you left today, and you're in conversation with other parishioners, is that you know how we guard and take care of those very valuable donations that we receive. And so on the last page is how your donations are protected. And this is just gives some insight on some of the internal controls, checks and balances, and the hard work that Lisa does. Every check written, every donation goes through her hands. And in all of those cases, she has a process of which she follows, and was well trained by Nina.
Yes.
And continues. Her and Aaron might want to speak a little bit just to the daily or the weekly operation of process with regards to donations and expenses.
Well, I love that we do have an excellent rapport with each other, and great checks and balances. So every check run that I do, I process the invoices, but they do not get paid until they've had authorization from Beth Dean, the administrator, or certain, like if anything is from Fund 5, which is the capital campaign, Bill must have his signature before I can pay it, and then after I have all my approvals, Terry is the overall approval of the reports to make sure that the invoices are coming from the right funds, they've all been approved. She signs them, and then they can go out. And then I guess even one further check is when Erin's doing her
On
end of the
Thursday.
month. Yes, everything looks like it went to the right place, and so I think it's just, step 1, step 2, step 3. So there's different eyes looking at it, making sure the money is coming from where it's supposed to, and it kind of works the same for donations. When the donations come in, typically it is towards your pledge, and if you've memoed something else, it might go to one of the different ministries. Closer to Easter and Christmas, you guys have the opportunity to make a special Thanksgiving for family members, for flowers or music, and so I make sure those funds go in there. And then a great way for you guys to tell me if I've applied something wrong is when I send out your semi-annual statements. It's about every 3 or 4 months, and then you can look at it and go, I didn't intend for that check to go towards that fund, and then you just email me or call me, and I make the change on your giving statement, and then we make a journal entry so that it actually goes to the right fund on the financial side, and Erin does that after Terry's approval.
So we all are very aware that we are not perfect, and there are going to be mistakes made. What we try and do is catch them for each other and just clarify. Sometimes it's just how a check, what the memo means. What exactly did that mean? If it's not part of a giving of a pledge, or and we'll talk about it. And
Can I say something about that?
Yeah.
Please, be concise when you write memos on checks. Poor Nina and poor Lisa, it's sometimes trying to decipher what folks really intend can be a challenge. It really can. Now, sometimes they're so desperate that they pick up the phone and call you and say, what did you really intend here? Because they really want to do to get it in the right place. So just be very specific if you're sending a check in, particularly for a special requirement or a special ministry other than your regular pledge, because we can't read minds in the office. It gets very challenging at times.
Thank you. So as you heard, that we have monthly meetings, and these financial reports are then go to Vestry for their approval. But what else do we do other than always have Erin, the expert, looking at them? But annually, an auditor comes in. And why don't you talk a little bit about that?
So, we've been using Leaf and Cole. I'm not sure how long we've been using Leaf and Cole. They were already doing it when I got here, and in 2015. And I believe I'm looking at Bill and Bob, because I know they're the ones.
Yeah, we were every other year for a while, but then we're too big now. We have to do it every year anyhow.
So what's really nice about having an annual audit is that you keep a relationship open with your external auditor. And so if something new does come up, you have that opportunity to be able to contact them as well and say, we're about to do this thing. Most recently, it was the beginning of the capital campaign last year, and one of the things, just anecdotally, one of the things that happens with a capital campaign is that the pledges toward the campaign are treated differently than the annual pledges, because the intention is to actually use them to initiate something new. And so we had the opportunity to talk not only with our campaign consultants when the documentation was being drafted for the campaign and the pledge requests, but also with our auditor to say, how does this have to be worded in order for us to be clear about how to account for it. And so we have the auditors come out in the spring, once we've finished up closing up the financials for the prior year, and they come out for about a week. They're here on site looking at all of our detailed transaction documentation and reconciling things and asking questions of many people. I know Liz and Lori at the gift shop can speak to. They've been down there to ask questions about how the thrift shop works and that sort of thing. So They do a comprehensive audit and then they're able to give us a report. And one of the things to always remember about an audit is that they're learning about our control system so that they can feel comfortable with the financial reports that we're providing to them. And we've had very good results coming out of the audits over the past few years. More and more, one of my goals is to we're not perfect, but to get to the point where when the auditors come, no adjustments are required during the audit process. And so that's something that, as a former auditor of nonprofit organizations, I can tell you is not common for organizations this size. So usually the auditors who audit small nonprofits or smaller churches, they know they're gonna have to come in and say, oh, this was the wrong period, or this was the wrong account, or whatever, and make adjustments. And my goal is for them to come in and say, no, it looks good, in terms of everything ties out correctly and everything is in the right place and in the right year and that sort of thing. So that's one of the reasons I'm here. And the past few years, I can let other people speak, but I think we've been getting closer and closer to that goal.
Yeah, you see a big smile on her face when there was only, 3 or 5 adjustments. So.
Terry, may I say something else? One of the other things is every year we make up a budget for our operations. And that's usually about a 3-month process. Although when we have our annual meeting, you just see the final budget at that time. But it takes about 3 months to actually come up with the budget for the year. We help, as the Finance Committee, put it together. But ultimately, how your money is spent is decided by the vestry. The vestry makes the decisions in terms of policy, where the money is spent, and our job is to keep track of it so that we make sure that if they allocate $70,000 for a particular thing, that's what it's spent for. It's not spent for something else. And if they want to change it, the vestry has the right to make changes, but we as a finance committee don't make those changes. That's policy stuff. That's the vestry.
That's a very important point. Yeah. And so he talked about the budgeting process. So here we go. It's that time of year. Something about people think about Christmas, and Erin thinks about the end of the year. She thinks about, oh my God, the end of the year, getting ready for the auditors. In October, you start thinking about Thanksgiving, and I'm sitting here thinking, budget. And so we might be in the office a little bit more. It might be a few more questions of the ministries. We really rely on people that run ministries and run the departments in operating one to give us some view. We'll do analysis and we can make recommendations, but a good budget relies on really in-depth knowledge of the ministries, and we need to get that from others. So it's a lot of, hopefully a lot of conversation. So that will be what we'll be working on and over the next couple months. And were there anything we missed in here? Questions, comments? Okay, so if you are on the patio, if you are in a ministry and you hear a comment or a question that sounds like someone may not understand what work is done, we would absolutely, every one of us up here and members of the finance team, finance committees, we love to share what we do. It's not always interesting to everybody, but we find it very interesting. So, and we have a lot of fun. So we call it fun accounting, but she calls it fund accounting. Yeah. So we appreciate that you took the time to come listen, and look forward to other questions. Yes.
I have a quick question. I belong to a lot of churches, and almost always they have a problem just meeting their operating expenses for the year, and they don't have any plan for long-term maintenance and capital expenditures. So how does St. Bart's handle that?
Well, I'm really happy to say that more formally, in the last year and a half, 2 years, we had a reserve study done. So we have actually a document that talks about what is needed for long-term maintenance. And based on that, particular report, the Finance Committee and the vestry approved funding into reserve and long-term maintenance and reserve on a regular monthly basis. We fund into these reserves, and our goal is to build those up over time. We know that that report that was done will change with a new building. And so there's a little bit of, we realize that, but we know exactly what you're talking about. It's very important to see the line item, and it's a line item on the operating budget, the preschool budget, transferring funds into long-term maintenance.
Yeah, that in fact is the number one problem in all churches, is unfunded long-term maintenance. And when we did the reserve study, we weren't even close. I mean, it was a joke as to how underwater we were. But the bulk of that, as it turns out, of the shortfall is all associated with the oldest building on campus, which we're sitting in. So you take that fact and marry it with the capital campaign, and now you're starting to see one of the primary reasons from a financial standpoint why the capital campaign made so much sense.
Mm-hmm.
Because you'd spend a lot of money trying to tackle everything in here, and you wouldn't be happy with none of us would be happy with the result. Whereas the improvements that we get with the capital campaign sort of kills two birds with one stone. It's new, it's exciting, a lot more flexibility and ability to do ministry, and also we lose a lot of deferred maintenance as a result as well. So it's a win-win type situation.
Yeah, because this building will go away completely,
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah.
Correct. Thank you, good question. Anything else? All right, thank you for coming.
Thank you.